Hi, Sam and John. Thanks very much for joining me for this podcast discussion linked to the Digital Operations Theatre at Digital Construction Week this year, that the Digital Buildings Council are the theatre sponsors. I just want to sort of kick off the conversation first by asking you if you could explain a little about who you are, what you do, and specifically, given you're both master systems integrators, and therefore it'd be really interesting to understand your perspective and, from that background and how that's linked to this BIM to smart panel discussion that you'll be having. Maybe start with John on this one.
Yeah, sure. Hi guys, good to see you, Justin, Sam. My name's John Clarke. I'm the operations director at Sightsolutions. So for those who don't know, Sightsolutions, we're a product distributor. So we sell a lot of kind of products, hardware, software to a lot of building systems integrators and a lot of the BMS world. A lot of training, a lot of support on those products and development. But really, the key part of the company that I look after is around our master systems integrator projects that we deliver. So the core of what we do in project delivery is integration. So the type of projects we work on will traditionally be beyond just a BMS connectivity, but we'll look at metering, lighting, data, cloud connectivity to different cloud services and various things. And it's a lot around normalizing data, about making sure things are consistently named, and that we understand what the data is, where it's coming from, who's kind of sending it to where and to who. And I guess our background is less in that BIM world really. We've kind of come across that on a lot of projects where the drive for us is to understand what's going on digitally in a building, and generally that is when there's a good BIM model on a project, that's a really good starting point. It's a really good single source of truth, we always call it, for the data to actually what is being built, what's actually going to be going in the building. And I think it's we've kind of pushed ourselves more and more into that space, just because we understand the importance of getting the data right kind of day one, because it isn't necessarily been designed for what we need, but we can see that there is a huge value in it that could actually really help us. So I guess hopefully what we're kind of talking about in this session is really going to see, is there anything we can do to tweak that to make it even more useful and even kind of give greater benefit, I guess, to what we need from the buildings. So that's kind of our route into it, is kind of by design of the type of projects we're delivering, really.
That's really great. And I'd like to come back to that point about sort of data, understanding what the data is for when the building is in use, rather than putting together a list of assets that will be delivered at practical completion. So I think that's a really important sort of point you've touched upon. Sam, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself? And it was kind of interesting about not just where you are, but sort of how you've come into this space.
Thank you, Justin. So I'm Sam Norledge. I'm the head of smart buildings. My role at the business focuses on the master systems integration side, similar to John. I'm involved with the DBC group, and also I'm involved with the Building Smart UK and Ireland, helping to drive collaboration between BIM and this whole world of systems integration and building controls. So as MSI, we're the ones who actually make the smart systems talk to each other. So I'm bringing some practical experience from what I know from the BIM world, from the BIM data, and building on those processes into smart building delivery. So my background is a mix of building controls and BIM, which gives me quite a unique perspective on this subject. And as Justin touched on, that bridging that gap between the digital construction to digital operations is part of my previous experience when I had been delivering BIM projects and building on that operational model, the asset information model at the end of the project, and making sure that gets used in operations.
So just to clarify, that previous kind of experience in BIM and controls was from when you're at a main contractor. So you've kind of moved from a main contractor and fit out specialist into this sort of master systems integration role. Is that right?
Yes. So as a main contractor, my priority was to make sure that that asset information model was correct and suitable for operations, and handing over that model at the end of the project to the facility management business. So over that experience, to try and enable this more unique approach.
In terms of integration, you mean?
Yeah.
Cool. So you touched upon there, and I'll let you start on the next kind of discussion point, on how you've been involved in the sort of some of the BIM initiatives, whether that's kind of NEMA, who are the event partners for the Information Management Theatre at Digital Construction Week. But also you mentioned Building Smart UK and Ireland, who I think are run by or powered by NEMA even. Can you tell us a little bit about the project you're working on there? And I guess the bit I'm really interested in is, if you see with what you're doing, is there a gap between the sort of BIM communities or BIM world and the smart buildings one? And do you see these initiatives, or if and how do you see these initiatives helping plug that gap?
Yes, yeah. There is definitely a gap, Justin, and the work I'm doing with Building Smart UK and Ireland, and in collaboration with Building Smart Japan and Building Smart Singapore as well, we are looking at how we can utilize the data structures within the BIM environment, within a BIM model, within IFC, to better enable smart buildings. So I've noticed the gap that a lot of this information doesn't get used in the delivery stage, where we've got a lot of asset information in these BIM models that we're not pulling out, and vice versa. There's a lot of relationship modeling that's done in these models that we're not pulling out for the MSI. So I've noticed that disconnect, and this is one of the reasons why I started the project. And I'm not the only one. There's other industries across the globe that are facing this dilemma of these two silos not being joined up. So yeah, really the goal of that project is to join this up, and offer a more rich BIM model that can be utilized for smart building delivery.
And John, can you tell us a little bit about, because I understand that you're the project leader for the BIM to Smart initiative with the Digital Buildings Council. Could you give us a sort of little idea of what that's about and how that might be different from, or what it is that people from the smart buildings space could be doing that isn't necessarily duplicating what is already going on in the BIM community?
Yeah. So yeah, we're kind of looking at we've kicked off a BIM to Smart working group within the Digital Building Council, and really that this kind of initiative is key to, I think, what the DBC is trying to do, and it's looking at where are there kind of challenges and gaps in the industry, and we're looking at it more from a smart side, like Sam there's very much from that, some of those are the kind of building side of things, and coming at it from that angle. We're very much on the, we care about the data coming out at the end. So what do we need from those guys in the kind of BIM delivery side? So it's really looking at gathering a group of, the core group, working group is a mix of MSIs. It's a mix of contractors actually delivering, whether it's lighting, BMS systems, and main contractors as well, just kind of trying to get a good mix of people. And really the aim of the group is to, try and identify and see where there are key challenges from the missing data, or maybe data not in the right format, or just a kind of lack of knowledge around it. So the kind of three areas we're looking at are probably around, we know there's a need for standardization. The smart world doesn't necessarily follow what the BIM world's doing, and vice versa. So can we try and close that gap and push some sort of standard and alignment between the two? There is that disconnect between the two, the kind of BIM to smart world. So some of it is just let's start talking about this more, us from a smart angle, and then hopefully we can kind of pull the kind of BIM kind of key users along with us as well. And probably the big one, which I guess things like this panel are hoping to get across, is around the importance of just general collaboration and education across these groups, because if we know that the BIM teams will go off and they're great at standards and things, and we're having to follow standards generally that are put forward by consultants. So we're trying to hopefully get those consultants to maybe buy in a little bit more to some of the kind of BIM elements that they can. What we don't want to be doing is asking multiple trades for multiple different types of data. You've got BIM team asking for all their assets in a certain format. We're then going to go and ask for it in another format. So it makes sense. Let's just ask everyone once, and there's a big kind of cost saving for everyone and effort saving, but also more value if we can actually identify, here's a live telemetry data point that we're getting smart out the building, and actually you can link it all the way down to exactly where it is in the building via the BIM model. I think the closer we can kind of pull those two sides together, suddenly the massive benefit you'll start seeing from actually having a fully federated model.
Well, look, huge thanks to you both for that. I think like yesterday when we were sort of preparing what we might talk about, we kind of said that we'd also give a sort of little about relevant. I mean, we'd talk about what you hope to discuss on the panel and also what might be learned by that. But given we had some surrounding discussions around that, I thought I might try and prompt some of that. So, for example, and I'll throw a few things at you both, and maybe we can discuss those in and around what might be discussed on the panel, what people might be learned. But I guess one of the things is that the gap seems to be one about BIM being more about design and build, and smart being more about the operation and performance of buildings when in use, and the master systems integrator having to sort of join the dots between the two. So that's one area. But is that a proxy for the discussion around digital twins, i.e. an asset digital twin being something which is developed during the design and build stage, and for want of a better term, or an agreed term, because these things are being chucked out as we speak, but a performance twin? So this difference between evolving from an asset digital twin to a performance digital twin. And I guess connected to this, to me, seemed to be something that John had said about one of the roles that a master systems integrator performs is kind of alignment by different documents from different, and I can't remember all the acronyms, so Sam might have to help me here, but like from the different stakeholders. So for example, the design consultants will have some specifications or design specifications. The main contractor will have their BEP, which you might have to explain what a BEP is.
BIM execution plan, that one.
BIM execution plan. And then also the client may have their specification, and I think Sam, you had a term which has an acronym with an E in it, or maybe starting with an E.
So
EIR. So yeah, employee information register, isn't it?
And I don't know if there are other stakeholder documentation. So it seems like you've got all these different things, and in an ideal world, everything would be aligned. But I'm guessing that is rarely the case. And you can have issues where maybe an ontology is specified, but isn't then included in the drawings, etc. So even on something, from one of the stakeholders can be different. So is that kind of what you're planning? Some of those things, is that planning what you're planning to discuss, and what people might learn from this panel?
Yeah. So you're correct. But we have to remember that BIM is a process, and what we're trying to get across here is that process could be utilized for smart building delivery. So like you said, if we went with the top-down approach of employers actually requesting this smart building information in their employers' information requirements, their EIRs, then they have a much more driving potential than a smart building consultant or a design consultant on a building. So if it's actually in the EIRs, then we can make that more defined. One thing that really interests me is I'm seeing a lot of relationships with how BIM has evolved in the smart building space. So if you think back to like 2011, when the UK government mandated BIM level 2, as it was called back then, which is basically just a 3D model and Kirby asset information. That top-down push from the government actually made a huge difference to BIM adoption across the UK. And I believe the same sort of approach needs to happen in the smart building space, and that's what we could be doing at the DBC throughout the industry. It could be done. It's just we've learned a lot from this BIM process from 2011, and they've made a lot of mistakes and failures over the time, and all of that is the same sort of data processes that we're trying to push across, and the same mistakes are happening in our industry, and we just need to learn from that and not just repeat the same mistakes. And it can be done. It's just we need a top-down approach. We need employers pushing this.
So the end clients, basically.
End clients, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I'm kind of spotting as often, and in what we do, getting the kind of smart information. Often we end up pushing a lot of information and data into a BIM model. Generally, to do that, you need some quite skilled people to actually put data in that model, and it's a CAD engineer or a BIM engineer to do that. Often, what we find is actually the kind of employers at the end of the job don't necessarily have the people that can control and manage that BIM model and keep it maintained. So, again, probably on the education side, it's around how can we, the employers need to understand what they want and actually understand the full benefit they can get from having that full BIM model, and not just jobs delivered and they don't touch it again, because everyone that's managed a building knows within the first kind of week or two someone's going to have moved a light or shifted something around, and if you don't keep that model up to date, then you've suddenly the data is no longer valid. And it's I think there's definitely an education bit around the consultants, the clients, to understand what they want, get that in day one, but they need to realize that's going to become an operational thing as well. It's going to be a live living kind of model, really, from PC.
I mean, that's interesting about the costing, because I was going to sort of kind of try and link your discussion to other ones going on. So, for example, I'm moderating a panel, I'm moderating one panel and I'm involved in another. One of the panel is about the how the smart buildings overlay to the REBA plan of works is going to be updated, and I'm guessing that like that BIM to smart sort of fits across, cuts across all the stages of a plan of work and could feed into any revision around the REBA plan of works. There's also a panel that I'm on, which is about plugging the gap between digital construction operations. I can see a link there to the BIM to smart one that you're on. I think Glider, who are the digital theatre sponsors, Lucas Cusack, who I spoke to in a previous podcast conversation, is running a panel that's about soft landing frameworks, and that seems to be very much linked to how you plug the gap between design and build and operations. Interesting, your point about cost is I think George Stevenson is moderating a panel on why aren't BIM models used by the FM teams, and I'm guessing the cost of updating those things and the expertise internally could be one of the reasons that they don't transfer. So that's kind of really interesting what you both said there about how it's linked to other conversations that are going on in the day, and what people might learn from going from one and drilling down into different parts of, learning from one panel and drilling down into other, more specific areas. I wanted to sort of finish this conversation with a kind of question about, we're talking about technology here, digital operations or digital construction. There's a forever onward march of technology. So it'd be really interesting just to hear finally about what you see coming down the line, or is on the horizon, or is already happening sort of technology wise, which might change this discussion about BIM to smart, or the evolution of asset twins, or selfish BIM to basically performance twins, or plugging the gap between BIM and smart enablement.
I think one of the interesting things I've seen in the last kind of couple of months has actually been, a lot of the a lot of the data we have to gather as an MSI, it's around what's the asset called, what are the points underneath that. If you've got a light, you might be reading the light levels, percentages, are there any faults, that kind of information. But actually, one of the more challenging parts is often the relationships that has. So you might have a luminaire. What lighting gateway does that link back to, and maybe what metering is feeding that from electricity side of things. And I've seen some tools recently that some kind of university folk developing where they're actually modeling BIM model, taking a BIM model and are actually able to use kind of AI machine learning and actually model some of those relationships without having to spend a long time manually going through and mapping things, looking at schematics. And they can actually follow ductwork from somewhere to say, right, this air handling unit feeds these maybe 100 different fan coil units out on the floor. So I think actually the kind of boom in AI has been largely talk and haven't really seen much use of it, but I think that is something that is going to have a massive kind of increase in importance, like being able to do that at the click of a button rather than having an engineer that maybe has to spend a month going through multiple schematics. I think that kind of innovation in that world will be huge in the longer term.
Well, it'll be interesting to see whether that will bring about the death of ontologies, but some experts are claiming. Sam, is there anything that you're sort of seeing happening, or you can see?
Yeah, exactly what John touched on, really. Those metadata models are being developed in BIM now. We are involved in the Building Smart project into some of this work, and it's been really interesting looking into this. And the ontology models are being linked, and we're trying to. Sometimes they're a bit overcomplicated, over engineered, and we're actually drawing them back. And we're finding that by drawing them back into IFC, into a bit more of a simplified schema, it's created a much easier way of delivery. And I think in the near future, we're going to start to see BIM models actually being implemented as standard ontologies on buildings. And a big statement there, but it's definitely coming, and we all need to be prepared for it, because, like John said again, AI models and things like that just need to be able to have structured data to be able to read, and what's better than a existing BIM model, one of the most structured data formats out there. But I'm also seeing that potentially we're going to start to see that top-down push for us. Whether it be like things being written into the EIRs because of maybe changes to the ISO 19650 standard, which is the information management standards for building operations. So these standards are looking like they might start to change, and as they change, they'll probably be picking up stuff like this, like the metadata ontologies, bringing in some of the smart building requirements. And as they become standard, it's like the clients are going to have to start using this stuff and enforcing it on projects, rather than hoping that the delivery teams put it together properly.
Look, thanks both. And I definitely think sort of that regulation piece, and it might not just be regulation, it might just be what happens in the public sector, something like the new hospital program, the amount of billions that will be spent on it. If they start specifying certain standards have to be adhered to, then that's going to ripple right the way throughout the whole industry that everyone else do, just by the sheer kind of size and scale of the projects that they're involved in, not just in hospitals but across the whole public sector. So look, really interesting. Huge thanks for your time. It's probably gone on a bit longer than we had originally planned, but it was a really interesting conversation. I think it's given a great kind of insight into what this topic's about, what people might learn from it, how it might be linked to other things being discussed. So really grateful for your time. Really look forward to attending the panel at the show and meeting you both there.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.